Therefore, they take on some of the attributes that occur when crystals grow. The idea also, of course, of those that are less physical are able to be more flexible in terms of interdimensional beings that can create a temporary form of ship that you may see as a light that can change shape or split into many parts and so on and so forth, exhibiting more quasi-physical or less physical attributes. So it just really depends on what reality they exist in as to what you usually see as their vehicle that is relevant for them to travel in.
And one person was saying how they showed their 4 and 6-year-old a picture of you, and they said it looked kind of creepy because the eyes were so dark, but yeah. I'm not sure if they were seeing actually a picture of a hybrid, because a hybrid has whites in their eyes.
Yes, although our pupils are so large, sometimes you may not be completely aware of the fact. But nevertheless, there are versions of hybrids that do have all black eyes.
And then the kids said, oh, after a while they thought, well, they look kind of cute. So, do you
We think so.
What?
We think so.
So how can you prepare children, or are they naturally prepared to be able to accept the visuals of extraterrestrials more than perhaps our generations here?
To some degree, they are more prepared because they are a different species themselves, more hybridized in a sense. But it is also up to the adults to make sure they're not taught to be afraid.
Right.
More information that comes out is an opportunity to educate children into the reality of what's going on, that they're not alone, there are other extraterrestrial species that exist, and to allow them to get used to that idea growing up will prepare them better than the last generation.
What about resistance from mainstream religion to the idea that humans are hybrids and that they were created through ET DNA manipulation and not created per se by God?
Well, everything still comes from source. These concepts, when you really get down to it, don't really contradict each other. In the same way that if you have a child, you created the child, but the child is also from source, from God, if you want to use that term. So these concepts are not necessarily mutually exclusive. You just have to understand them from a different perspective or a different framework and give them their due at the level in which they exist. Because the existence of extraterrestrials and the hybridization of humanity is simply one of the ways that exists within God, if you want to use that term, for things to evolve. People may talk about the idea of the so-called difference between evolution and intelligent design, but really, in a sense, evolution is an intelligent design. So these things are not necessarily contradictory. If you look at them from a more neutral and balanced perspective, you'll figure out a way in which they paradoxically actually come from the same center source.
And I guess genetic manipulation is a way that intelligent creation actually uses. Yes. They use us as tools, not they.
Well, no.
It's
Remember that on a different level, you've agreed to this form of transformation because it's part of the Earth's evolution in becoming the sixth hybrid race. You all jumped on that ride, whether you remember it or not.
Right. Can you tell us more about the role that AI is going to play in our future? Did you ever say that you were partially artificial intelligence? Or?
I am not, but we use artificial intelligence, although again, that's not exactly how we would frame it, because intelligence is not artificial. But the idea that we understand you may create what appears to be an artificial device through which to communicate with higher intelligence, that's more the way we would frame our experience of it. Because again, as an example, our spacecraft are representative of a physicalized form of our own higher minds, and we communicate telepathically with it because we are already connected. you will discover the same thing as best as we can perceive in your energy, because when you create a device through which real consciousness and real intelligence can express itself, the intelligence of the higher mind and the cosmos, you will realize eventually that you are in fact talking to your higher mind and talking to the intelligence of existence. So it's really just about creating a device that's sophisticated enough to allow the intelligence to express itself in a way that makes sense to you.
And the orbs that surround your planet.
Yes. They help stabilize the idea of the momentum that we have created to make it even more challenging to not be capable of choosing something that does not serve us.
Can you tell us more about the Shayel, the fourth hybrid race, where they are and what their part in the hybridization agenda is?
It is from the Shayel that the precursors come. The precursors are those that are born off planet in that hybrid civilization that may now and then walk among you to see if you can tell that they walk among you, to see if you can feel the vibration of otherness that comes from them, to see how used to their vibration you may already be or not, to help gauge when it is appropriate for open contact to begin. That is the job, the duty of the Shayel.
And the Yael will be the first hybrid race to make open contact with us, as far as I understand.
Most likely, yes.
But not the first race to have open contact with us.
No.
Can you tell us who the first races will be to have open contact with us?
Well, you've already had some individual open contact with the idea of the Pleiadians, the idea of many indigenous tribes on your planet, particularly the Maya, is representative of an ongoing contact that has been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's just that most of you don't know these things are happening yet. So the idea is there will be some contact from what appear to be indigenous people who are in fact extraterrestrials. There will continue to expand the idea of the contact of the Pleiadians. There will be the expansion eventually of the hybrid children that will live among you. Again, the Shalanaya, in that sense, that will be presented to you by the Yael, and a few others that we're not really supposed to mention at this time.
Okay. And one person asked about, they had heard that there were high-level meetings held on Jupiter between several of Earth's leaders and CEOs, as well as ET leaders, for some kind of peace and protection agreement. Is that true? And can you tell us anything about the participants?
Well, first of all, nothing can be held on Jupiter. The gravity would crush you. And it's also a gas giant planet. There's no solid surface until you go so deep within the core of the planet that, again, the gravity would crush you. Now, there have been extraterrestrial bases on some of Jupiter's moons. There have been some sporadic communications that have been received by humanity on Earth from those that have established bases on the moons of Jupiter, and some of that did involve the idea of exploring open engagement. But that's as far as it's gotten. It has been paraphrased into this concept, a little bit blown out of proportion, a little bit exaggerated, as meetings on Jupiter. That's an extremely oversimplified understanding. It's a symbolic representation of some of the communications that have sporadically occurred between extraterrestrials on bases on Jupiter's moons with some humans who are attempting to find ways to open up the idea of open contact for your people.
Now, when you say meetings or communications between those on the moon and here, does that mean that the humans were transported to the moon or something? Or does it mean that?
I mean literal communications by some artificial means, either radio waves or something else that is beyond that your people, a few of them, have been allowed to receive through devices they were given some time ago.
So this, you've mentioned that there were some extraterrestrial contact with Eisenhower.
Yes.
I believe. Is there anything more you can tell us about that so we can understand that in the context of this discussion?
Well, a little bit different. It took place, obviously, at a different time, under different conditions, with different beings, such as the Greys and the hybrids that existed at the time, and a few other races. But the idea is, again, you were given the offer of open contact at that time, and your established government decided that it wouldn't necessarily be to the benefit of society at that time. However, a plan was created for the eventual release of that information and a plan for open contact, but to some degree, to go back to the idea of your conspiracy theories, that plan was usurped by some who allowed themselves to grab power and who sequestered the information for the interests of maintaining the power for themselves, and therefore the plan was not eventually followed.
So did he physically see? I mean, was this like a physical meeting where he was standing in the room with Greys?
Well, standing on the tarmac. It took place at a base.
But the frequency levels were matching close enough that this could happen without psychotic shock?
For the beings at the time that were involved, close enough. And distance was still kept.
So is that kind of contact available to other humans now that we've raised our vibration? And
to some degree, yes. To some degree, yes. But again, remember, this was another time and another place with a different energy, a different frequency going on, and distance was still kept so that the energetic fields of the bodies wouldn't interact directly to the degree that would cause a problem.
Because if the Greys don't exist anymore...
Well, they are on their way out, evolutionarily speaking. But the Greys are a different issue. Because the Greys used to be human.
So was it the Greys that had contact?
There was some Greys and some early hybrids. But they were designed specifically for the purpose of those interactions. So they are not the hybrids you might meet today.
Okay.
And yet still precautions were taken.
We recently heard about Essassani activity in the Middle East like several thousand years ago.
About 1,000 or so, yes.
It had to do with the Sasani Empire of that time.
Yes.
Did they have interaction with humans on Earth? And
not directly, no. But they were seen from time to time, and they were considered, again, the idea of gods, which is why certain people were named after them, and why that name was given to the empire that was created by the descendants of the ones who were given the name of the god, that they thought was the god's name, but was simply the name of our society.
So do the Essassani now have interactions with humans other than this interaction through Daryl and you?
Only remotely, in the same way that you're experiencing it now.
Okay. So is it possible for other humans to channel other Essassani beings other than yourself, since the only person that you come through is Daryl?
It is possible for others to connect to the Sasani vibration and bring through information in a similar fashion to what you're seeing here, but they will not bring my personal identity through.
Okay, and what's the difference between ETs and angels?
Angels, in a sense, euphemistically speaking, are the first reflection of all that is. ETs are simply beings that come from other planets. Angels are non-physical beings, higher dimensional beings, the first reflection of God, so to speak. The first shift in frequency from the all that is, as a reflection of all that is. Do you understand?
Yes. Will the ETs, when we have open contact, will they share technology with us that helps us clean up our oceans, fix our planet basically from the destruction that we're experiencing?
To some degree, yes. But the point is that you must begin to do that yourselves to show that you are ready for such things. We're not here to save you. We're here to help you. So you must begin those processes on your own for us to know that you're committed to those processes. And then we can help you. We can upgrade what you're doing. But we're not going to do it for you.
Can you tell us a little more about how the Greys destroyed their planet? And is it essentially the same thing that we're seeing now on Earth?
You are seeing the beginnings on your planet of what they did to theirs, but theirs went much farther into destruction. Many ecological systems completely collapsed. The pollution and the technology could not correct it. Many different things went awry, as you may say. They lost the ability to reproduce. Your reproductive rates are already going down right now. So you're beginning that particular idea, but there's still time for you to not necessarily go as far as they had to go with it.
And like, what ecosystems would you say are at most danger or would be first to collapse on the planet based on our trajectory at this present time?
Between the jungles and the oceans, it's 50-50.
And the jungles are part of our breathing, basically, right?
Yes.
The oxygenation of the planet.
Yes. Now, you're already seeing massive changes in your climate, which in a sense is a natural cycle, but humanity with their technology has exacerbated it and accelerated it. But the idea now, as you have actually recently reported on some of your news channels, is not only now have some of the fires on your planet been caused by the weather, but the fires are now changing the weather. So that's also part of the acceleration of your climate change that wasn't necessarily foreseen.
And the extensive pollution in the ocean.
Yes.
And the idea that the conveyor would stop.
Yes.
Essentially. Is that the most imminent?
That's one. The other is the release of too much methane from the ocean floor.
Which all of these things affect the quality of our atmosphere.
They do, and they cause extinction level events.
Wow. So there will be an Earth that moves towards an extinction level event.
Oh, there will always be a version of Earth, and maybe even several versions of Earth that move in any direction you can imagine. It's up to you to navigate yourselves in the direction of the ones that you prefer. Again, that's why we give you the formula. Perhaps it needs to be underscored how powerful the formula is as an energetic device to help you navigate in the direction you say you prefer. You have to really understand it as if we have just given you an atomic bomb for positive energy.
So as people evolve, like sometimes people get concerned, well, who's going to do all the menial jobs? Because who's that going to be excited to, you know? And
just because you can't imagine how somebody might be excited to do something doesn't mean there won't be people who are excited to do it, number one. And number two, if you actually develop your technologies in a proper way, many of those jobs won't be necessary. They can be handled by other beings that are not necessarily human beings and not necessarily even biological.
Right. So that does seem to be with the automation and everything and the development of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
It becomes more and more clear that many of the jobs that humans find distasteful will actually be able to be taken over by
some. But again, some may find a renewed excitement to be involved in some of those things, such as people who love gardening. So the idea also is to understand, again, I'll reinforce this again, when you change the way you go about doing things socially, politically, technologically, so on and so forth, you will find that many of the jobs that are now required are unnecessary at all. Because you'll be doing things in a very different way.
And A tetrahedral UFO hovered over both the Pentagon and the Kremlin.
Yes.
What was the reason or message for this, and can you tell us who was on board?
The basic reason is to show the interconnectivity of energy that exists between those two particular nations. Whether it's expressed positively or negatively, it is a sign that there's a strong energetic link between those two nations in a variety of ways. One moment. We are being told that we cannot reveal the identity yet.
Okay. When you land on our planet, what will be the procedure? Will you land near Daryl and then have a TV interview?
No. The channel may be present when I land my ship. But with regard to the idea of the Sasani initiating open contact with Earth, it's going to happen in a very different way.
Oh, do tell.
No. Just be prepared for the unexpected.
Well, it definitely seems like because of the high vibrational level that you operate on and the potential for psychotic shock that people could experience if they were to actually physically see you. Is it more likely that these kinds of interactions will happen telepathically in a sense, or when a person is in an altered state and they're at a higher vibrational level?
That will be part of the beginning. But remember when we said that many actual interactions take place in a slightly altered version or frequency of physical reality?
Yes.
It's going to happen. It's going to feel at first a little bit more like a dream. But it will be real.
And what happens when someone encounters your consciousness in general?
Well, it depends on who that someone is.
Well, clearly they would have to be of higher vibrational state to be able to have the encounter at all.
Or altered enough that they can handle it, which is what I'm saying, is you may find that the actual beginnings of open contact with my civilization and a few others will take place in an altered state that may feel like a dream and then slowly over time start to crystallize into something more familiar to you as physical reality.
And the impact on the individuals that have contact with you?
It will open up their ability to be inspired by higher frequency information tenfold.
It will be life-changing, I would assume.
Absolutely. You will never be the same again.
I think many of us aren't the same again even now.
This is true, but this will be a magnitude beyond what you can imagine right now. You will start to break down the concept of physical reality in a very particular way and start to perceive things more multidimensionally in a very particular way.
So you will rub off on us in a sense.
Yes.
And can you tell us something about your parents and siblings? And are any of them involved in the current Earth Contact program?
Well, we've already mentioned the idea that our father is a teacher of first contact specialists, and so he is very involved in that sense. My mother is, again, more involved in the idea of the natural construction of artificial environments in which certain scenarios can be played out before they are actually tried out in what you would consider to be true physical reality. Do you understand this?
Yes.
Simulations. She constructs simulations of realities for others to practice in. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
All right.
And similar to Anima in a different way, though, because she's more...
Very different way. Anima is a social engineer. That's not the same thing.
And what is your relationship to Anima?
Colleagues. After first contact is made, you need social engineers to help you go through the process of acclimating to the open contact.
Is she related to you?
No, not in the way you mean it.
Okay. And siblings? Do you have siblings?
I do.
Do you feel like sharing anything about them?
It's not about what I feel. It's about what's appropriate in the timing. We will save that for another story.
Okay. Yes, because we do really enjoy it when you share your stories with us.
All right.
And your father, can you tell us any more about him and what?
Well, as we have said, he's one of the longest lived on our planet, over 1,000 years old at this point. The idea is that he conducts many different kinds of experiences that allow first contact specialists to practice their art, their craft, without actually causing any kind of damage to the real civilization. So he takes you through a kind of telepathically locked scenario that seems completely real. We allow ourselves to give over to him in a way that makes us experience a simulation as if it's actually happening for real. There is no question at the time that it is real until he unlocks us from that telepathic hold, so that we can learn what we have learned, what we need to explore, what we need to discuss, so to speak, to again teach us the process necessary to make sure we do not cause damage to the civilizations we will contact.
So he's a very advanced Sasani consciousness.
Yes, a very advanced first contact specialist, yes. Now, one moment. It is also him and a few others like him that introduce us to new contacts, to new dimensions of experience. His mind is connected multidimensionally in a very unusual way and introduces us to those new dimensions and those new consciousnesses that may inhabit those dimensions. So he opens doorways for our civilization to other experiences of other realities as well.
So in general, the idea of humans being raised initially on planet Earth with the idea that this is the only reality and the things to focus on are having a great career or getting ahead, and all of these things keeps us very focused in a linear reality.
Yes.
And ET contact appears to have something more to do with the idea of like lucid dreaming, where you're able to shift into higher frequency states that you've forgotten about as a human.
Yes.
And that are now being reintroduced to us in a much more complete way to practice being able to exist and communicate on a higher frequency level that would be commensurate with contact with ETs.
Yes, yes, yes.
Would you like to add anything to that as a conclusion?
Only that it must be done carefully, cautiously, over time, as you are ready for it, because even though many would just think we're just these physical aliens walking around on another planet, we're much different than that. And a lot of the so-called psychic shock that would come from a too close interaction with our frequency is because it would put you in touch suddenly. And we know this may sound like something that you would prefer, but it would put you in touch instantly with a much larger picture experientially of yourself in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And if your psyche is not ready for that, it can fragment and fracture.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this information about the ET world. And I know next month, the title of the session that you've given to us is going to be called The Infinite Restaurant.
Yes, the Infinite Restaurant will be an exercise and an explanation to allow you, as we have just discussed, to begin to see from the oversoul perspective so that you can get used to the idea a bit at a time of how something on that level experiences itself multidimensionally. So it will be a fun exercise that will be one of the first steps toward experiencing your own reality from the viewpoint of your oversoul. So please join us for a delicious, energetic meal in the Infinite Restaurant.
Thank you so much, Tadeo. We do truly love you.
Our unconditional love to all of you as well. And now, please enjoy your exercise meditation.